welcome to our digital campus. It is so great to have you with us this Sunday, isn't it, Nico?
It's honestly awesome. I'm so glad to be with everyone over here, especially you, Kerry.
Oh, thank you. I'm really glad to be with you, especially as well. We are so glad to have you joining us. If it is your first time this Sunday, welcome. You are so welcome to be here. We are in our final series, actually our final week of the series, Return of the King.
Yeah.
It's been a phenomenal series.
Beautiful series. I won't lie, it's one to remember.
It is, yeah, definitely. And Tom is actually not going to be with us this week. We have a special guest today. It's going to be Paul Rowney. He is our Riverside campus pastor, and he's going to be preaching with us today. So we're really looking forward to that. And he will be right up after this clip.
Hey, I'm so glad that you have decided to join us for the next few moments, and I hope that our time together is going to encourage you and inspire you. To set up our time together, I want to show you a video piece that our team has put together. You see, as you're watching this right now, I'm not sure who you think Jesus is. Maybe you just came across this video and clicked on it to check it out. Maybe you're looking for answers, hoping to find them there. Or maybe you're a part of our regular digital community. Really, no matter who you are and who you think Jesus is, I hope that through this video and our time together, you'll get a sense of the nature and the character of Jesus. And not just that, but here in it, in this video and our time together, an invitation that we've been extending to you throughout this series. And even if you're joining us for the very first time, I hope that this video inspires you, encourages you, and maybe even moves you towards asking some questions.
There was a time in history where humans believed that the sun revolved around the earth. A groaning of light forcibly shifting from east to west, and in the center, man. And still a cavity formed so deep in the human heart, desperate for light, for hope. Nothing could fill it. No man, no woman, no object, nothing but God. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son to be the center of it all. Wonderful Counselor, mighty God, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Jesus stepped in to shake things up, eradicating darkness, banishing idols, taking his rightful place on the throne. King over all. He is the sanctuary within our trials. He is the hope to the brokenhearted. He is the voice for the voiceless. He is the dignity for the ones who wander. He is the King of kings and the Lord of lords. He is enduringly strong and entirely sincere. He is the King of heaven and the King of glory. He is eternally steadfast and immortally graceful. He is the King of righteousness and the King of the ages. He is imperially powerful and impartially merciful. He is the anointed and appointed ruler. He is the unparalleled and the unprecedented. He is Jesus. He is King.
Now, as you watch that video, I'm not sure how you responded to the idea of Jesus being all of those things. Whether you responded with some sense of doubt and speculation, or whether they resonated deeply with you. But our hope is that as we've gone through this series together, you have, like I have, been challenged to step off the throne of our lives, the seat of control, and to place Jesus there, to place him there as our King. And if you've missed any of this series, I really want to encourage you to go check it out on our Digital Campus YouTube page. You can check it out right here, and it's in the description as well. We've looked at people's lives who've been changed as they've discovered a king that's worth following. The most unlikely people from the most unlikely circumstances, each uniquely invited to step into God's story, just as you are, just as I am. But today, as we wrap up the series, I want to look at another person's story, another person who had an encounter with Jesus that changed their life forever. And we're going to see something in their story that I think will teach us why we're invited to make this decision too. This decision to make Jesus our King. and hopefully learn from their lives how we can do it. We meet her first in Dr. Luke's account of Jesus' life, and in Luke chapter 8, he records what happened like this. Soon after, Jesus began a tour of the nearby towns and villages, preparing and announcing the good news about the kingdom of God, the good news that he was about bringing into the here and now. And he took with him his 12 disciples and along with them some women who had been cured of evil spirits and diseases. Among them was Mary Magdalene, from whom Jesus had cast out 7 demons. And Dr. Luke records that number because in biblical numerology, 7 is the sign of something being complete. It's a way of Luke saying what Mary was suffering under was so significant. It was all-encompassing. But he takes these women along with him and other women who contributed out of their own resources to support Jesus and his disciples. Now, what's so interesting about Mary is so much is actually unknown about who Mary Magdalene actually is. What we know is that she either grew up in or lived in Magdala, which was in the north coast of the Sea of Galilee. It was known for its fishing. Some people believe that it was quite a prominent town, but one thing was for certain, it had a pretty checkered reputation. There have been speculations and people pushing their own agenda throughout human history, in fact, about who they think Mary was. But here's what I find so fascinating about her. You see, Jesus healed a lot of people, but very few of their names are actually recorded, and yet Mary is one. The question is why? Well, I think it's because her life after Jesus had rescued her from such a hopeless situation, is an example to you and I. We see in Mary an incredible devotion to following Jesus. She shows courage and bravery in the face of real tragedy and loss. When Jesus goes to the cross to die, Mark tells us in his account that there were some women who were gathered nearby watching from a distance, and among them was Mary Magdalene. You see, it was the woman who stood by while the disciples fled. It was the woman who were at the tomb that when Jesus was buried while the disciples were hiding in fear. And it's Mary Magdalene who had the very first encounter with the risen Jesus. But I think for those reasons we hear of her story, but I think there's another reason why we hear of Mary Magdalene as recorded in the Gospels. I think why she plays such a prominent role in spreading the good news of the risen Christ, the risen Messiah, the risen King, why she plays such an important role in all of that. It's not just because of her faith. I think it's because of the move in her life from who she was to who she became, and how that story is our story too. To explain what I mean by that, I want to read to you another passage that I think speaks into Mary's story and perhaps kind of explains a little bit what I mean by that. The Apostle Paul, he's writing to the church in Ephesus, and he's trying to unpack what he thinks this journey means for him, and I think what it means for you and I. And so he writes to this church in Ephesus, and he says this, Ephesians 2. I want to read to you from the Message translation. It says, "It wasn't long ago that you were mired in that old, stagnant life of sin." What's so important for you to hear is that you've got to know this. You were made in the image of God. That's the start of your story. It's the start in Genesis. You were made in the image of God. But as Paul's telling us here, we were also mired by our old lives, by our sin, and we see that in Mary. It's this old life. That's where we were caught. That's where we were stuck. You let the world, which doesn't know the first thing about living, tell you how to live. You filled your lungs with polluted unbelief. We breathed in and we thought we knew it all. And then you exhaled, you breathed out disobedience. God, I can do it all myself. We all did it. All of us. Doing what we felt like doing, when we felt like doing it. All of us in the same boat. It's a wonder God didn't lose his temper and do away with us all. And I'm not sure who you think God is, and maybe you think that that's who God is, but then Paul turns the tables. He says, instead, this is who Jesus is. This is who God is. He is immense in mercy and filled with an incredible love. He embraced us. He embraced us. He took our old sin-dead lives and made us alive in Christ. See, it's through Jesus' life that he teaches us how to live. It's through his death that he takes away our mired and marred and sin-dead lives. And through his death, that gets removed from us. And as he's raised to new life, as Christ is risen from the dead, we too You too are made anew in him. Paul goes on to say he did this all on his own with no help from us. Then he picked us up and set us down in the highest heaven in the company with Jesus, our Messiah, our King. See, the truth is, this was Mary's story. Made in the image of God, mired by her old life, and then remade into a new creation. This is what she experienced. This was her story, and this is my story. And maybe it's your story too. And the truth is, this is the good news to all of us, no matter who you are. And when we come to understand this, it's with this sense of gratitude for what Jesus has done for us, with this sense of surrender, that we acknowledge Jesus as King. Yes, Jesus being a king has deep historical context and it has vast implications for our world and how you and I, if you consider yourself a follower of Jesus, how we're meant to live. But Jesus being king is also meant to be a deeply personal response. A deeply personal response for every single one of us, for you watching right now. A response that acknowledges his work in our lives, his work of rescuing you, of rescuing me, of redeeming us from a state of being marred by our sin, by what we've done and not done that's separate from God's nature and his character. The moments in my life where I've not loved people well and not loved God well. He takes that all away through his life, his death, and his resurrection, and he offers us something new. You see, as Paul says it here, he says, when we choose to believe this, believe it. Believe Jesus' death on the cross is the very act that frees us and forgives us of all that we've done. And it's his resurrection that moves us from death to life as it moved him from death to life. It's this that enables you and enables me to experience the same. It's in believing in this profound thought that I'm made new. It's not by what I do. It's not by how good I am. It's not by how much you can get right. It's because of what Jesus has done for us that I am a new creation. And you're invited to experience it too. We're all offered it. And so the question, I think, then is how do we respond to all of this? How do you respond? How do I respond to what Jesus has done for us? Well, again, Mary's life is such a beautiful demonstration of what this looks like for you and for me. And from what we know of her life for certain, what we actually can tell from Scripture is, I think there's two clear things that that Mary invites us to do in response to what Jesus has done for us. The first is simple. It's not easy. It's simple. It's a simple thing with a deep implication. It's a simple response in a moment, maybe even in this moment right now, but a response that's worked out throughout all of our lifetimes. The first thing that you and I need to do is make a decision. We see this in the life of Mary. She has this encounter with Jesus where Jesus rescues her from such a hopeless situation. And from that moment, she clearly makes a decision to follow Jesus, to be a disciple, to put her life aside, to put the control of her life aside, and to surrender to Jesus. Now, I don't know whether Mary was there at this moment when Jesus tells us what he thinks this decision looks like. But what I'm absolutely convinced of is that she would have heard about it. It was such a provocative thing that Jesus said that it would have spread quickly amongst the disciples and the followers of Jesus. You see, when Jesus tells us what he thinks it means for us to respond to what he's done for us, he says it this way. He says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. To the people who were hearing this in this moment, they would have just been struck by what Jesus had just said. I think sometimes we kind of just pass over it, but we've got to get a hold of it. We've got to see that the words Jesus uses here to the people that he spoke to 2,000 years ago, they would have understood exactly what he meant. They would have seen in literal demonstrations exactly what Jesus meant by saying what he's just said. You see, they would have seen on a regular basis people, oftentimes their own people, both criminals and political leaders, religious leaders who went awry, people who the Roman oppressive government empire saw as enemies, and as a way of punishing these enemies and as a horrific statement of power and control. The Roman Empire crucified thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And as part of what they would do, as part of their crucifixion, is that they would force these people who would go to death this way to carry their own cross. to carry their own cross to the point where they would be executed, to the place where they would be executed, the same way Jesus experienced it later. And so when Jesus says to his disciples, to his followers, pick up your cross, his hearers of the day would have understood exactly what he meant. They knew, because they'd seen it themselves, that anyone carrying a cross had lost control of their lives. If they were carrying a cross, they had lost their autonomy. They were no longer in control of the outcome of their lives. There was another power that had the final say over their life, another government, another king that was in control. You see, Jesus' invitation to you and I to pick up our cross and follow him is less an invitation to suffer for him, although suffering is not excluded from the journey of followers of Jesus. But I think it's far more an invitation to realize that the decision you need to make, the decision I need to make on a regular basis, is to say that I'm no longer in control of my own life. I'm choosing to surrender control, to choosing to lose autonomy to another power, to another king, to another way, to Jesus. We're invited to surrender our lives to him. Now, beautifully, Jesus doesn't ever force this on us. He is kind and gentle, eternally graceful, and filled with immeasurable love. But this doesn't diminish the reality that to follow Jesus, I want you to hear this, that to follow Jesus means we've got to let go of control of our own lives, of our own finances, of our own relationships, of our own identity, of our sexuality, of our work. We've got to let go of control of these things. And this is the decision we're invited to make. It's a simple act of surrender, but one that I'm learning and growing in my understanding is something that I've got to work out daily. It's a decision motivated by gratitude and wonder for all that Jesus has done for me and for us. It's a decision to follow him and to, as I do that, to let go of control of our lives. And in so doing, when we do that, this is what you've got to hear. When you choose to let go, when you choose to surrender, when you choose to step off the throne of your own life and allow Jesus to step into that place, it's here, in the moment of surrender, in the moment of letting go, that we find life, real life, life to the full now, and yes, life eternal. That's the first thing that I see Mary teaching us in her response to what Jesus did for her, is that you and I were invited to make a decision. The second thing that I see in the life of Mary and what her response to Jesus teaches us about how we too can respond is as we choose to follow Jesus, we make a decision, yes, to follow him and to surrender our lives to him. But the second thing we're invited to do is to make a declaration. Here's what I mean by that. You see, one of the things that Mary has been called by various people throughout human history as they've looked at her life and studied who she was, is she's often called the apostle to the apostles. The reason why she's called that is because Mary is the first person to meet with the risen Jesus face to face. And when you read about this encounter, it's actually incredibly confusing for her. I mean, she watched Jesus die, she watched Jesus buried, and she watched a stone roll in front of it, and then she goes to be there, to be close to that place, and the tomb is empty. And she's so confused by this. The whole encounter is amazing to her, and she turns around to kind of leave, and she sees a gardener who she thinks is a gardener, but it's actually Jesus. And eventually, after realizing that it's actually Jesus she's speaking to, and she just falls to her knees, she acknowledges him as her king, as the one she wants to follow. And in response to that, Jesus says to her this, he says, go. Go find my brothers, go find everyone else and do what? Tell them a message that I am ascending to my Father and to your Father, to my God and to your God. And what does Mary do in this moment? She finds the disciples and she tells them that she'd seen the Lord, the risen King. She tells them this message. I love how N.T. Wright reflects on this thought of Mary being the apostle to the apostles, and it's so important to hear this. He says, we have to comment on how interesting it is here that when the time comes in the story, when the disciples all forsake Jesus and run away, it's at that point, long before the rehabilitation of Peter and others, it's the women who come to the tomb first, who are the first to see the risen Jesus, and who are the first to be entrusted with the news that they have seen the risen Christ from the dead. This is of incalculable significance. Some of you may have heard this before, but it's so important to be reminded of this. But if you'd told a first century person, If you told a first century Jewish person that Jesus would first appear to a woman, nevertheless entrust his message of being risen from the dead to a woman to testify to others that they'd seen the risen Messiah, if you told that to a first century person, they would have just thought it was laughable. You see, at this point in human history, women had no standing in society. Their witness in any event would never stand up in court. And yet, Jesus entrusts his message to the most unlikely person. That despite who Mary was, despite her past, despite what happened to her, despite her standing in society, Jesus asks her to be the first person to share the good news. Yes, she made the decision to follow Jesus, but what that decision led to was that ultimately she would make a declaration to the world around her of who Jesus was. Here's my point in all of this. You see, Jesus uses the least, the last, the lonely, the ones who think they've got nothing to offer, the ones who society has cast aside. He uses us. He uses me. He uses you in your weakness, in your shortcomings, with all that we are and all that we are not. He uses us to share his good news with the world around us. I love how the Apostle Paul says it in 1 Corinthians chapter 1. He says, "But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of the world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him." You are, no matter who you are, invited to be a participant in declaring to the world around us the good news of our risen King. How? How do we make a declaration? Well, we do what Mary did. We just tell our story. We simply share our experience with Jesus. You see, the power of Mary's story is that it was her story, and she shared it. She didn't hold back for fear of not being good enough, for fear of not being accepted, for fear of who she was. She had a story of how Jesus changed her life, and she shared it with anyone who would listen. I want you to know this, that if you've made a decision to follow Jesus, you have a story. Here's the simple application to today's message for you. Share your story. You have a story of how God has changed your life. Would you share it? So, as we look back at Mary's story and what it invites us to do as we choose to respond to what Jesus has done for us, the first thing is this, is if you consider yourself a follower of Jesus, maybe you would begin to, or maybe be encouraged to continue to do this. Make a declaration. Keep sharing your story of how Jesus has changed your life. He'll use you, yes, you, in the most incredible ways to change people's lives around you when you simply share it. And hey, if you're part of the digital campus, that can get super practical. Share the message. It's how you can be a part of it, right? But maybe for you, the way you need to respond right now is as you are discovering and maybe discovered today what Jesus has done for you. To discover what he has done for you, moving your life from marred to remade, is to make a decision. Make a decision today to let go of control of your own life, to trust Jesus with the outcomes, to let him sit on the throne of your life, to let him sit in the place of control, to surrender your life to him as the ultimate authority. Over what? Over every area of your life. Over your work, over your family, over your identity, over, like I said earlier, your sexuality, your finances, what you do today and what you do tomorrow. Would you make a decision? And I think it's daily. Man, this is a consistent wrestle in my own heart to be on the throne myself, but Jesus invites me daily to make a decision, to allow him to be my king. So if you're choosing to make a decision today, I think there's 3 simple things you can do right now. The first you may not be able to do right now, and I'll tell you why, but there's a way for you to respond. The first, I think, thing we can do to respond, if you're making that decision, is to get baptized. Baptism is this beautiful physical thing that Jesus gives us to remind us of the decision, the moment in our life where we've decided to make him king, where we've stepped off the throne of our own lives and placed him there. Baptism is a reminder of that journey. It's in water. We get into water and we're reminded of our old lives. We go down into the water, which is the symbolism of our old life being taken with Christ into his death. And then we're raised up out of the water as a reminder and a symbol of us being remade. If you're wanting to mark a moment in your journey of faith, if you're wanting to mark a moment where you say, I've made this decision, what I'd love for you to do right now as you're watching is connect with us. You can do that in the chat if you want to be baptized. You can email us at digital@grace, connect with the team, and we'll help you figure out a way for you to do that. Wherever you are, we'll help you figure it out. The second thing that I think we can do, and perhaps I think this is an invitation to all of us because I find myself needing to do this too, is to pray. I've just put up this little prayer here that I hope you'll pray with me. It's a prayer that I've said on a regular basis. It's something that I'm trying to build into my rhythm of life. But maybe if you're making that decision today for the first time, or maybe for the first time in a long time, you would pray these words with me. So would you join me? Let's pray together. Jesus, today, I'm making a decision to follow you. Today, Jesus, I'm making a decision to surrender my life to you. Help me to trust you. Help me to live this out. Thank you. Thank you that you walk with me always. Amen. Hey, maybe what you want to do is even pause the video and just go back to that, screenshot it. Use it as a reminder, as a prayer you can say regularly. And then the last thing before I end our time together, the last way that you can choose to respond right now as you watch this is through worship, it's through song, it's through singing. And so the team are going to lead us now in a song that I think is a beautiful way for us to respond to Jesus as our King. It's a song called Great Are You, Lord. I hope that you'd use it as a moment to surrender to him. Let me pray for you. Jesus, I want to thank you so much for our time together today. Thank you so much for this invitation to life, to experience life as you have intended it to be. Would you help us realize, God, that the way we get there is by letting go. The way we get there, Jesus, is by surrendering to you as our King. Help us to do that, all God. And once we've done that, would you help us to grow in awe and wonder for who you are, for your magnificence, for your splendor, God. And as a result of understanding what you've done for us, Jesus, and making that decision to follow you, give us the courage, all of us, to make a declaration to the world around us of what you've done for us and for our world. Jesus, you are great. You are great.
You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. You give life. You give life. You are
Sure. Another great time of worship today, Nico, and such a special message that we had from Paul today as well. It was so great to have a different voice on our digital campus. For those who are new, we like to say that we are one church in many locations. So it's always great to have different voices on. And just a reminder for you as you're going into your week as well, Paul's 2 points about making a decision and making that declaration. And whichever one of those two you need to take into the week ahead of you, or maybe even both. To remember to ponder on that as you go into the rest of the day. And then also, if you're interested in getting baptized, like you think, oh, I'm online, and we're going to sprinkle you through the camera.
I mean, we could try.
But we could try, you never know. But it's, we would love to journey with you through that. So if you are interested, don't forget you can email us at digital@grace.org.za, and we'd love to connect with you and figure out how we can go through baptism with you.
And another way to get involved is giving. We're going to a time of giving. So if you're new, please don't feel any pressure to give. But if you're part of the digital family, this is the time whereby we'll just give, and there'll be an element that pops up at the bottom of your screen, and just feel free to just engage in that as well, as we just really continue this act of getting involved.
Exactly. And because getting involved isn't just Sundays, Nico.
Sure.
It's stuff during the week. It's the baptisms. It's giving. It's things like that. What else is getting involved?
We've got 10 with Tom on Thursday. If it's your first time, guys, every Thursday we got 10 with Tom, so make sure you jump onto that. You really will just get involved. As Carrie said, it's more than just a Sunday.
Exactly. And 10 with Tom this week's going to be with Paul.
It's with Paul. Don't forget that.
I don't know, if you have anything special you want to say about Paul, now would be the time to do it. I'm just
let us know in the comments.
Don't forget to also like, share, and subscribe. As Paul said in his message, share this message to those in your community, those in your world. This is a way for you to make a declaration as well of your faith. So like, share, and subscribe. It is so cool to see how many people are following us, who are watching our worship playlists throughout the week as well. It's another way to get involved. So it's been so exciting. And it's been so great to have you guys with us today. Hey, Nico.
It's been awesome. It's been awesome being with you guys again. Like I told you, I'm coming back, guys. And it's always such a good time. So do the things that need to be done so that the pots can be done.
Wow, I like that. I like it, the pots. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you on Thursday for 10 with Tom. Otherwise, next week, Sunday. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.